The White House on Wednesday denied Maryland's request for $15.8 million in disaster relief funds from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to pay for repairs after devastating floods swept through western Maryland in May, despite the state meeting FEMA's threshold for assistance. This came a day after Trump approved disaster relief from several other states, including West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, and Michigan, states that all happened to vote for him last election. Maryland's Democratic Governor Wes Moore called the denial an insult and said he'd appeal the decision. Joining us now from Frostburg, Maryland, an area impacted by the flooding, is Governor Wes Moore. Governor Moore, welcome back to the weekend. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So, Governor, have you had any direct communication with the Trump administration about reversing their decision after you announced plans to appeal the decision?
I actually did, because we just came back from a Council of Governors meeting where I was actually selected by my peers as the new co-chair, as the new vice chair of the National Governors Association. And I told the Trump administration directly that I thought this decision was petty, that it was partisan, and that there was no basis for it. It is unprecedented for a governor of Maryland to be able to put in for emergency disaster federal relief, especially when we not just hit the criteria, we exceed the criteria, and knowing that the only states that received any federal support whatsoever were states that voted for Donald Trump. That the states that did not vote for Donald Trump were neglected. And the irony is that the areas that were most impacted, the areas that we are talking about in Allegheny counties and Garrett counties, these are areas that did not vote for me when I ran for governor. These were areas that voted for Donald Trump, and we were some of the first boots on ground. We've been working with the heroic efforts of Mayor Hamilton, a Republican woman who's doing a remarkable job, running a budget that is less than $2 million, despite the fact that there's over $10 million of damages that this storm has done. And the Trump administration has looked that area in the state of Maryland in the face and said, you are on your own. This is a Trump playbook that we are seeing here, and it is absolutely absurd that we are having people who are now left to fend for themselves, and a state that is now leaning in, continuing to support our people when the federal government has essentially said there's nothing that we can do for you.
And Governor, just to put a finer point on what you were just saying in terms of who the people in Garrett and Allegheny counties voted for, let's put up on the screen, like, these are overwhelmingly Trump districts. Look at that. He got 75% of the vote in Garrett County in the 24 election, and he got 68% of the vote in Allegheny County in the 2024 election. So, Governor, as a follow-up to what you just said in response to my question, you said you spoke to the Trump administration directly, saying that their decision was petty and partisan. What was their reaction to such strong pushback?
Well, the reaction was no reaction, because we have not seen any new details or anything else that's going to help support the people of Allegheny and Garrett counties. And, you know, and I think about it in this case, Jonathan, where, you know, literally one of the first visits that I made as governor was actually out to Allegheny and Garrett County, because they were having a water crisis. And so we called up the mayor, a gentleman named Mayor Coburn, who was out in Lonaconing, and called him up and said, I'm on my way. And we went out to go see him. And I remember the first time I met Mayor Coburn, he said to me, he said, Governor, he said, do me a favor, turn 360 degrees. And so I turned 360 degrees. He said, the only guarantee I can give you is you didn't see a Democrat anywhere within 5 miles of where you just looked. And he said, but you know what? You're the first governor that's been here since 1996. These are areas that feel left behind. These are areas that feel like the government has forgotten about them. And the reason that we've been so thankful for the work of people like Mayor Hamilton, who's been on the ground doing heroic work, the reason that the state government, that we were some of the first boots on ground, I had a chance to monitor the damage that is taking place in that area. And to add insults, you mentioned it earlier, the day before they denied Maryland, they actually accepted and gave West Virginia over $10 million in support for a storm that had about the same amount of damage. that ended up hitting Allegheny and Barrett County. This is petty, it is partisan, and it is punishing. And it's punishing people who deserve better from the federal government.
So I want to go. Governor, I wanted to play this spot from Donald Trump, basically saying that he wants to wean FEMA, claims that you shouldn't be governor if you can't handle it. Take a listen.
We want to wean off of FEMA, and we want to bring it down to the state level. A little bit like education, we're moving it back to the states so the governors can handle it. That's why they're governors now. If they can't handle it, they shouldn't be governor. But the FEMA thing has not been a very successful experiment. Very, very expensive, and it doesn't get the job done.
So, Governor, when you hear the President of the United States saying that FEMA hasn't been successful and forgetting that our taxpayer dollars are funding FEMA and saying that states should be alone at this, and recognizing, to your point earlier, that the majority of folks that have received a lot of FEMA aid have been the poorest states, the red states. How do you combat that? How do you actually, have this conversation with the administration, with the American people? It's like, why does FEMA, why is it important? And why should someone sitting at the White House care about every single citizen, regardless of who they voted for?
I mean, that quote was a classic example of Donald Trump and this idea of just picking politics over people. And think about what is FEMA's job, right? Emergency management. Their job is to make sure that they are working with states to ensure that we are preparing for tragedies and disasters, either man-made or natural disasters, and making sure that communities can get back on their feet as quickly as possible. And there is no one who's going to argue that the structure of FEMA did not need alteration. We understand that. But the answer is not to basically leave people on their own. But again, one thing that we've seen, this is also a continued trend that we've seen from the Trump administration, particularly when it comes to the state of Maryland, where Maryland has now lost more federal workers than any state in the country. Over 12,000 federal workers Donald Trump has fired. In the month of June, Donald Trump fired over 3,500 federal workers who happen to be Marylanders. That is the largest month-on-month firing of federal workers than we have seen we have seen in 30 years in the state of Maryland. So this direct assault that has happened on us, that has happened on the state of Maryland, it just continues. And frankly, he just continues to use different language to justify the fact that he's going to try to punish us because we didn't support him in the last election.
Governor, where you have the president in that clip we showed saying you want to wean the states off of FEMA, he is using FEMA to spend a whole lot of money. He's sending $608 million to the states to build migrant detention centers akin to the one down there in Florida, whose name I am not going to repeat right now. But your reaction to FEMA finding buckets of money for mass deportation, to participate in mass deportations, but nothing for the people suffering in those two western counties in Maryland?
That instead of having FEMA focusing on tragedies and natural disasters, that we are going to use FEMA to focus on Trump-made disasters. And here's the thing, everybody knows that we have a broken immigration system, and we've had a broken immigration system for a very long time. And this is very personal for me because I come from an immigrant family. I understand that. But I also know this. If the president of the United States wanted to fix the immigration problem in this country, he could do it tomorrow, because he could simply go to Congress and say, I need a comprehensive immigration bill on my desk that does three things. That makes sure that we are, yes, going to focus on securing the border, that yes, we are going to focus on getting violent criminals out of our communities, and yes, we are going to make sure that we have a humane pathway to citizenship. And he's not doing that. He's using emergency dollars in a way that's dealing with a tragedy that he is creating.
Maryland Governor Wes Moore, thank you very much for coming to us from Western Maryland. Keep us